Hello, everyone. I'm Felicia McCorkle, Manager of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Major League Baseball. I'm excited to be here with you today for this conversation. Now, we're hosting Unfiltered, a featured speaker series of diversity, equity, and inclusion focused topics designed to bring awareness, education, and insights on key topics that matter from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective. Today, we continue the series with a conversation with the Players Alliance, an in-depth discussion offering insight to the group's mission, programs, future goals, and of course the partnership with Major League Baseball.
Now, you might have heard of this group as things started to go on around the country. They formed a group that was going to go ahead and try to tackle some of the issues that were going on in baseball pertaining to the African Americans. So let's get started. Let's join the panel right now, and let me get into the proper introductions first. Hello, everybody. They're all smiling. It's all coordinated. We're ready to go. All right, so down on the bottom, this guy played 16 years in the big leagues. He finished with 344 career home runs and 115 stolen bases. He's a three-time All-Star, 10 seasons with 20 or more home runs. And when he went to play for the Yankees, he had back-to-back home runs of 40 homer seasons. Pretty impressive stuff. But the most impressive thing on his resume, he won the 2016 Roberto Clemente Award. I'm talking about, you recognize the smile in the face, Mr. Curtis Granderson. Curtis, thank you for joining us, man.
Hey, thank you for having me. Super excited to be here. Always a pleasure to be with you, Harold.
Just above him up there with the Negro League T-shirt on, this young man played 7 years in the big leagues. He hit a lot of home runs in the time that he got to play. But here's the most impressive thing that I learned about Chris Dickerson. He hit home runs off of a trio of Cy Young Award winners. Jake Peavy's in your book. King Felix is in your book. You got Max Scherzer twice. What? Go ahead. Chris Dickerson.
I didn't think about it that way, but I'm glad that's interesting. Thank you for going back into the book for that.
Yeah, we're digging up the good stuff. Talking about the good stuff, I'll go to the gentleman in the middle up there. I'm talking about with the beard now. I knew him when he was a youngster, like 18 years old, fresh face, just joining into baseball, getting going. Known him a long time. 13-year veteran, 191 home runs, 142 stolen bases, 2010 All-Star with the Diamondbacks. And most people know you from your days in the Diamondbacks. You broke in with them, but he did play with 6 different major league teams over his career. I'm talking about Chris Young.
I appreciate you having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Hey, guys, now you think you had a resume. Look at this. I mean, this thing is loaded up, and you guys are nothing compared to the main attraction tonight. All right, no, she's got a serious resume. I'm talking about Michele Meyer-Shipp. She was named MLB's Chief People and Culture Officer by Commissioner Robert Manfred in August this year, and she comes to us with a huge assignment. She's going to be in charge of everything human resources, on-field, off-field, offices. Her resume is extensive. Michele, welcome. We're excited to hear from you and excited to have you part of Major League Baseball. So welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. Looking forward to this discussion and the partnership that we will have together.
So Curtis, tell us about how it all started.
It's crazy. With all the negative that happened with COVID this year, one of the good things is all these players were at home, so it was able to easily connect with everybody. A lot of people were taking to social media, wanting to make sure their voices were heard, but posting those black squares on Instagram and Twitter just wasn't enough. And a lot of guys, the black players in this game, both current and former, came together and said, okay, let's do something more than just post something on social. So D. Gordon, Cameron Maben, and Edwin Jackson, who's played with almost every team and every player, started reaching out to everybody, and that's how the formation of the Players Alliance began. We were able to file for our nonprofit status. We were able to get guys like you see here, Chris Young, Chris Dickerson, and myself, and many others that came together to say, we got to do a lot more than just say something on one day out of the course of this year. And for the course of the last 6 months, we've been doing a lot more than just that one day. And that's how the Players Alliance ended up becoming what it is today. Guys were looking at each other, seeing everything that was happening. The news was bigger than ever before. And before, you would see guys miss something. And did you hear that? Did you catch that? But again, the season wasn't playing. Guys were at home. Didn't have to have the difficulty of trying to catch up with each other. Because both Chris's here understand that we've been trying to do this for decades here, but always something comes up. We got to fly on a plane here. Scheduling doesn't work out well, but then everybody learned how to get a hold and get in video chats and do all those different things. And those large group chats was able to make this all possible to what you see today.
Some of the conversations clearly with some of the players at that time, letting them know we're meeting with the commissioner. We're going to have conversations with him about all this. And we're still trying to figure out what's going to happen on opening day. There was so many things going on. What were some of your conversations at that time that you recall?
My conversation was, talking with all the players, talking with Grandy, talking with CC, seeing what was going on, trying to see if we could have everybody on the same page, but also giving guys the freedom to make their own decisions. By no means was the alliance put in place to be able to control players or to be able to tell them what they have to do in certain situations, but it was to be able to give them a voice and give them the freedom to be able to do whatever they want to do. So, I received phone calls. I'm sure Granny received plenty of phone calls about guys wanting to express themselves in so many different ways. And Grandy, I think, gave the best advice when he just said, hey, do whatever you feel, do whatever's in your heart. That was one of the first times personally that I missed not playing the game, not being able to be out there, because it's so easy from us on the outside, myself, Grandy, CC, Dickie, to say what somebody should do or say what we would do in that situation, but we're not the ones that are out there on the field. So it's tough to speak for those guys, and it's tough to tell those guys what to do. So, that was a moment where I wish I could be out there with them to show my support, but I felt like we expressed to them enough that we're right there by their side.
Well, Harold, not to cut you in there, one of the big things, everybody saw everybody holding the ribbon on opening day. That was Andrew McCutcheon who came up with that idea. Him and his wife came together and said, hey, I want to bring everyone together. And by having this ribbon out there and everybody collectively coming out, black players, white players, Latin players, Asian players, together on opening day with everything going on, COVID, George Floyd, and players not getting an opportunity to be out there, that's where that came from. And guys were in on it. And those conversations that CY was having, as great as you think some of them were intense. Guys are like, look, I'm the only person of color on my team. It's difficult for me to communicate with everybody on here. I only have 1 year of service time. How do I make my voice heard? How do I go out there and do this when everyone's telling me I shouldn't do that? And it was very interesting and impactful to see it finally come together to get opening day going.
Most of my tough conversations were guys calling me who were having trouble understanding why this was so important to us, because I feel like, especially the guys in this panel, I'm pretty sure every single guy in this panel, when they were in their clubhouse, they didn't have any kind of head bumping with anybody in the clubhouse. They were good guys. They got along with everybody. They enjoyed the game. They had fun. So I think people assume, a lot of my friends would call me, CY, dude, why is this so important to you? You don't have these same issues. You don't have these problems. Nobody really judges you like that. You're a major league ball player. Everybody likes you. You get along with everybody. It doesn't matter what color I am. You treat me the same as you treat everybody else. And that's when you have those tough conversations and try to explain the bigger picture of what's going on and why these killings and why all these injustices that happen affect us so much. And after those conversations, I'm glad to have had those conversations, because we never had those before. So after those conversations, they're able to understand. That's when they step in. They say, hey, I get it now. What can we do? How do I say something? How do I speak up? I don't know how to approach this. And that's when I'm able to step in and help those guys out.
Everyone always talks about chemistry, and they always relate it to if we're going to win or lose games. But I look at chemistry in a different way. We have to know the landscape of our team. Which one of us can I joke with? Who can I be serious with? Which one can I speak to in front of the group? And I think that helps make it a little bit more understandable in terms of when I can address things. And if I ask a question like Michele said, I also have to be receptive to that answer. I heard from a couple of guys this year that there were players that grew up that said, look, none of this stuff ever happened around me. Where I grew up, I was in a very privileged neighborhood. There was never any issues with police, no one in my family, none of my friends, none of my extended family. So I also have to understand that as well. And I also have to assume that, okay, just because I'm hearing that they've never experienced it, they're not wrong. And now they have to also listen to me and give me an opportunity to express my side of this as well. As you start to lay that lay of the land and get that chemistry and understand when I can speak, is this the right time? Is this the right place? I think that helps make everybody a little bit more comfortable to understand I can say something in this moment at this time about this topic.
Michele's a mom of 3 black males. And I know when I would leave the house, my mother was worried if I was ever going to come back because of driving while black. And so she started teaching me that at an early age, that your life is more valuable than a ticket or an argument with a police officer. So, Michele, we usually don't get to talk to females about this subject on a roundtable like this. So you're a perfect candidate for this. How do you deal with that?
So look, so Mason's 18, Marcus is 19, and Miles is 22. And, we taught them the minute they started learning how to drive about the whole driving while black, protocol. And it is a protocol. And we have friends who are police officers who actually, test pulled them over, or we'd have them pull up on them on the side of the road and scare them and, see what they would do. It's a damn shame, but it is the reality of life in America as a black male. As a parent, as a mother, as a father, I mean, it is really unsettling. It's unnerving. And this is one of the conversations that I've been having with my colleagues and my friends, my white friends, over the course of the entire summer. When they ask me questions like, help me understand, I'm like, help me understand. Do you have to think about your kid whenever he gets behind the wheel of a car? They're like, no, never do. I'm like, well, guess what we have to think about every single time one of our sons walks out the door. And, the praying that we do that they get home safely. And the praying that we do that, to your point, they hold their tempers when they do get pulled over, because they talk a lot of, what, at the dinner table, but, you want to make sure that they're going to do the right thing when it happens. So it's teaching them, it's educating them. What really is just unsettling as a parent is the fact that we still have to have these conversations with our kids today. It's unfortunate. I never thought in 2020 I'd have to have these conversations, but unfortunately we do. And what I've watched happen with my young men is, they've appreciated the harsh reality of the world we live in, and they are, they're navigating accordingly. And it's uncomfortable as hell, but we got to deal with it.
And it doesn't stop just because you're out of your teens or your early 20s. It still continues. I got pulled over 2 summers ago. And let me tell you, I was pissed and I was still mad, but I held to my protocol and then I got mad later. But I drove home from Cooperstown. I got pulled over there for no reason, driving out of the traffic, and it's like 5 miles an hour and I get pulled over. And I was mad for a 4-hour drive home. But I processed it, understood it. I took it to teach and share it and learn with other people. But that was a different circumstance. And so I'm a little older to handle that.
People think it's not a real thing or it's just a crazy coincidence, but it's not. And it's driving while black is something that never goes away. Like you talked about. I mean, I've been pulled over a couple handfuls of times in my life for different reasons, but the reason it never goes away. If you're a black person driving in a hoopty, you get pulled over because they feel like you're doing something illegal. You're a black person driving. You're a black person driving in a really high-end car. You're like, hold on. I either want to pull him over for curiosity to see who he is, which I've been told before. Hey, I just pulled you over to see who you were. Somebody told me you moved into the neighborhood. I just want to see if it was really you. Or you get pulled over for some type of suspicion on why are you driving this car. But driving while black it translates into every part of our lives. It's shopping while black. It's meeting somebody new in the gym while black. It's having anything super low end or super high end. It's so many questions that comes from the outside world on why are you in this position or how you are in this position. I mean, I could have somebody come here and work in the house and come here to do some plumbing. And for some reason, they still feel like I'm just a little bit ahead of you as far as status goes, because you just happen to be lucky to be fortunate to do this. But on the grand scheme of things, they know when we both walk outside those doors that we're looked at completely different, no matter what our status is as a person. And that's something, I mean, that truly bothers the black community, I feel. And it's something that's also very hard to explain and very hard to understand unless you're the person, like Michele said earlier, walking in those shoes. And if you haven't walked in those shoes before, I mean, I can understand how you could look at this and be like, oh, that's not a real thing. But we're sitting here telling you it is.
I was standing outside. We were renovating our house and standing with our guy who was renovating the house. And this couple walked by and they said to him, "You have a nice house." And they looked at me and said, "You're doing some good work." And I said, "Mm-hmm."
Hey, when I bought this house I'm in, my mother was my realtor. She walks me in. We do a full tour of the house. The realtor at the end says, "When is your buyer showing up?"
Wow.
All right.
Like, don't worry about it.
Curtis, go ahead. Curtis, go ahead. Then we'll go back to Chris in this one.
Like CY said, it's more than just the driving while black. I mean, I've had a situation where riding while black. We got pulled over. My buddy who's Hispanic and white, he's the driver. We have a white female in the backseat of the car. I'm the passenger. I did nothing wrong. We get pulled over in this situation. The cops come to my side of the car, ask me to get out of the car, and then don't say I'm handcuffing you, just start to handcuff you. And I preference that and say, just think about it. When someone reaches for you and doesn't say anything, if we haven't had those conversations like Michele has had with her son, my first instinct could be like this: "Hey, what you doing?" And then all of a sudden, here's a story of, remind you now, I had just come off the World Series with the Detroit Tigers. And now here's a story. Curtis Granderson got aggressive with the police officer. And now all of a sudden we have this sad, tragic story to happen. And think about that. I wasn't even driving the car. They didn't handcuff the white lady in the backseat of the car. They didn't handcuff the lad and the white guy who was driving the car. I was the one handcuffed. And these are situations that continually happen. And you talk about the real estate. My sister just sold her house and she's in Mississippi. Her realtor told her, "Hey, take all your pictures down, because when people come into the house and they know a black person lives in this house, sometimes that can sway some of the buyers." So this happens in more than just driving while black, shopping while black, buying while black. This happens in so many different places.
Go ahead, CD.
Yeah, so the man, the myth, the legend that took me to my first Yankee games at Old Yankee Stadium when I was a kid, growing up and spending the summers with my grandparents in Jamaica, Queens. My grandfather was also a New York City police detective, and I was 15 years old, and I was about to turn 16, and guess what my birthday present was from the detective? The book, Driving While Black. That was my birthday present. That was my first introduction to what I was about to experience driving as a black man, and that's how basically my driving career was going to start. Was understanding that I will never be looked at the same, driving a vehicle. And so it was early that I had to understand that, and through the course of my life, I know exactly what he's talking about. And that's one of the things I was going to talk about earlier is when all of this started, to hear the conversations of how this has been, this is already being passed down. And we're not that old. We're 36, 37, 38 years old, but you have, young CC who's just starting to drive. You have Prince's kids who are just starting to drive. And even though we may seem young, and theirs was just like yesterday, where we had to learn how to do the 10 and the 2, yes sir, no sir. They're having those conversations with their kids right now. So it's kind of wild. And part of that conversations is as this situation started to unfold and we started to peel back the curtain on these inequalities and racial injustices, knowing exactly, Michele, as you said, is knowing how terrified my mom was.
When you left the house, no doubt.
I left the house, I had no idea. I never had an idea how scared she was every single time I left the house until this year.
Where's the game going for the minority? And Michele, you're sitting in those meetings. I'll ask you that question first.
Yeah, so first of all, I think we all have to change the dialogue. And the first thing we need to recognize is we need our leaders to appreciate our owners, our presidents, et cetera, to understand that candidly and technically, there's no more minority. If you look at the demographics across the U.S., we are actually becoming majority minority. So the mindset of, oh, there's no talent out there, I can't find the diverse talent, That's a fallacy. It's there. We just have to go look for it. So what I think needs to happen is we need to be more intentional. We need to be more proactive and more strategic in sourcing that talent. It's one of the things that often gets in the way, not just in baseball, but I've seen it all across corporate America, is what I call that kind of affinity bias. We hire in our image, we hire in our likeness, we hire who we know, we hire who was referred, we hire a friend, we hire a family member. We've got to break that paradigm, and we've got to start with sourcing and creating a deeper pipeline of diverse talent. So it's, where are we recruiting? What schools are we looking at? What are we doing with intern programs? Once we get talent in the door, what are we doing to groom that talent? What are we doing to make sure that our interns and our new hires have support no matter who they are? Do our Black and brown employees have the same kind of mentorship, sponsorship, support, access to stretch assignments that our white employees do? What are we doing to help grow and recruit and retain? A couple of really, neat things that I think are happening, and again, things that I was excited about when I joined baseball, was a couple of the programs that Commissioner Manford launched, over the last 5 years. So it's my hope that with the program he launched called the Diversity Pipeline Program, and another program, the Diversity Fellowship Program, and some other programs that have been launched, those programs are efforts to literally be more strategic in how we source the talent, grow the talent, develop the talent, and keep the talent. But something, the fact of the matter is, Harold, we didn't get into this situation overnight, right? And we're not going to get out of it overnight. So one of the things that we also have to do here is be real and level setting people's expectations. We're not just going to put a program in place and in 2 years, we're going to have parity at 50-50. It's going to take us time to build the pipeline, to get the talent in, and to keep the talent in. Another phenomenon that we see happen in front offices, again, in sports and outside of sports, is a lot of organizations spend time recruiting the talent, but then when they get the talent, they can't keep the talent because their environment is not such that people feel welcome. Like the conversation we had before, people feel uncomfortable having their voices heard. So you have to actually work on your culture and your environment and make sure that everybody, no matter what their background, feels that they have a voice and they can be heard. So there's a lot of work to do. This is very complex. At the end of the day, I say we need strategy, we need accountability, we need transparency, and we need to be in this together to support each other through all of these efforts, because it takes a village to get this right.
I hear this conversation daily. I get calls constantly, whether it's scouts, former players, executives, you name it, across the board. How do we change this narrative and what's happening in the game? And we start talking about the numbers all the time, and we fall back on, well, it's the sabermetric movement in the sport. And I always go, did you see the movie Hidden Figures? Black people know numbers. It's just numbers. And so we get lost in that. So Chris Dickerson, I go to you because you've been trying to knock that wall down to get into front offices and have been asked to help out, come in and whatnot. What are some of the barriers that you've come across?
Well, Harold, it's a funny thing that you asked that, because I don't know if you remember a couple years ago, winter meetings, and I saw you there. I went on the show late towards the end. I came on with you and you and Matt towards the end of winter meetings, and I was simply just walking by and I said hi. But one thing that I was noticing is walking up that one alley as you come out of the Luxor, I noticed every kid, what I called the backpack crew, there was very few kids that came out that had the Yale backpacks, that had the Cornell backpacks, that had the Amherst backpacks, that were all going to pursue these analytical positions to get into these front office positions. And you notice that there were very few Black kids that were in winter meetings that were pursuing those types of positions. And so I think it's hard to, again, Michele, like you said, it's hard to mirror, that hiring of mirroring people that mirror you. And that's difficult. It's the same thing as on-field play. It's hard to want to do something if you don't see people that look like you doing it. So being on a call, with some of these conversations with people in the front office, it's hard to imagine yourself being in that position, if you don't see other people that are like you, because then this perception of it being a white sport is going to continue. And, it's not something that you're going to want to subject yourself to in being in that type of atmosphere when you're going to be up against it. You're going to be a kind of the lone wolf on some of these things. So I think it's difficult. And a part of that is just getting this interest back into baseball to where we have kids of color that are really interested in baseball to start to pursue these jobs, to start to pursue advanced statistics and analytical, courses in college, to where maybe this might be a background to pursue more of these jobs. So I think and I think that will be one of the keys is getting more participation in the game, and to where we bring back an interest in the game of baseball, to where people want to start being a part of this narrative, this movement, to start to increase the participation both in the front office and on the field. Because I know how it is. My mom ran the HBCU summer program and was doing the same battle, is trying to get these kids prepared and trying to get them to understand that, it's going to be an uphill battle once they step into corporate America, because it's simply they've been overlooked for a lot of these different positions. But we need more of them to just be like, hey, it's my turn to change the narrative. I don't care what's up there, but it's my turn to help tell the story and to help change the landscape of these front offices.
I think the biggest part, one of the reasons you're so short-handed with African-American kids playing baseball now, is economically. To travel and be part of the travel ball circuit is so expensive. And then you see nobody else who looks like you. I'm going somewhere else, and then college scholarships are not afforded. And all of a sudden, it's just a overarching problem. So you having come through and still reaching down and touching that with all your different involvement, what's the economic challenge in baseball for you?
Like you said, it's tough for kids to be able to go to these tournaments, to go to these showcases. When I was, like you said, I was towards the beginning of that whole movement. When I was a kid, there was only a few select teams. And the only way to get seen was to go to, back then it was called a Team 1 showcase or a Perfect Game showcase. That was pretty much the two opportunities that you had to be seen. But even with those opportunities, you had to pay for a flight. You had to pay for a hotel. You had to, be invited. But even after you were invited, there was nothing in place that would help me get there. I'm not saying I grew up lower class. My family was middle, lower, however you want to call it. But my mom had to scrape to allow me to get to all these things. We were driving to Florida. We were driving to Arizona. And luckily, I had a mom that had her own business to where she had the time to be able to do that. If I grew up with a household to where parents had to go to work, I don't know how I get access to these places, which is one of the things I'm excited about the Alliance being able to create these opportunities for kids to be able to go to showcases, to where they can have access to these showcases, have access to scouts. Mainly the only reason I was able to be seen by a scout is because I happened to go to the high school that was ranked number 1 in the nation at the time. So scouts weren't coming to see me. They were coming to see the program. And it just so happened that I went to that school. The other 8 schools in my district, scouts didn't go to any of those games. And it was some players that when you see them play, I would watch them play. I would watch myself play. I'm a pretty honest person with myself. I would see those guys and be like, man, that dude's better than me right now. That dude's going to be in the big leagues one day. That dude is going to get drafted, no doubt. Little did I know, that dude wasn't even getting seen. He never got seen. He never got any exposure. A scout never went to his school in the inner city, and he just had no knowledge of a showcase, period. So it's about education, about getting the word out there and showing these kids what's really available to them and creating programs to allow them to get seen by these professional scouts.
Curtis, what are some of the things that the Players Alliance is doing to address those issues?
We want to make sure that some of the stuff that's happening can start to be tackled. The equipment, like we talked about, that's one of the barriers right there. If you ever want to see something expensive, and this is holiday time, look up purchasing a metal bat. Any age group, whether it's T-ball all the way up through high school, these bats go anywhere from $100 to $500. And the thing about a baseball bat, you're probably going to need a new one the next year because you've either grown, you've gotten bigger, the age group has changed. So that's just one expense. We don't have a glove. We don't have a ball. We don't have training lessons. We don't have private coaches. We don't have all that stuff. You start adding those different things to it, plus the travel ball expenses. It gets very expensive for families to be able to play this game. So we want to go ahead and just make sure that we let these kids and families know that we're here, that we give more opportunities where maybe we can come a little bit closer to them. Maybe we become a little more centrally located. It's not always a tournament that has to be in Florida or has to be in Arizona. What about Kansas City, home of the Negro Leagues Museum? It's a great place in the summertime. The weather's nice. It's centrally located. It could possibly be traveled. What about in the South, the Mississippi, the Georgias, the Louisianas to Alabama? These are some of the things that we're talking about from the youth circuit. And then also once we start to get these kids, hopefully opportunities to play at the next level, maybe an HBCU showcase where, again, some of these schools like a Southern, a Grambling, a Jackson State, a Mississippi Valley State that aren't always being seen get an opportunity at another time right before the draft ends up happening. And these are just a few of the things that we've been talking about with the Alliance that we hope that we can see unfold once COVID's finally taken care of.
Michele, you have a son who's getting ready to go play college football, and you come from a football family, basically. What was the attraction of football? What's the excitement of football compared to maybe the other sport?
It's funny. It goes back to something Chris D said a minute ago. It's, my boys grew up seeing people who look like them on the field, of the football field. My brother-in-law played professional football for 8 years for the Arizona Cardinals. So as they were coming up, that's what they knew. They were never, it's funny, me being here with all of you guys, like before this, I never even thought about baseball ever, because we were geared towards football. So I think what you guys were saying about giving kids access, giving them exposure, letting them know that it's a real opportunity is where it's at. Because heck, had we known about it earlier, had we had a focus on it, one of my boys might be playing baseball today. So it really is that exposure, that seeing people who look like me playing the game. That's one of the reasons this alliance is so incredibly important, because no matter what program we put out there, if Black kids, if young Black boys don't see you guys and they can't reach you guys and touch you, they're not going to believe that they can be it. They're not going to think it's attainable. It's just like you said, Chris. They've got to see it to be it. So what you're doing is critically important to getting out there and letting kids know that they too can be you.
Big news about the Negro Leagues and how Major League Baseball is going to look at their numbers and validate them, as I see your shirt there, CD. It was from 1920 to 1948. They've taken all those players and said now your records are now Major League validated. I got some statistics and stuff I'll talk about at the end, but I'm curious you guys' thoughts. So see why I know you wanted to speak on something, so you go right ahead, jump in.
I think that's beautiful. I think it's long overdue, but either way, I think it's amazing that those guys are getting acknowledged like they should have. You hear old players talk about back in the days that if they played against some Negro League players, that were some of the best players that they ever played against in their lives. And you hear all the stories, and the only way that we were able to hear those stories was if we were to go to Kansas City and go to the Negro League Baseball Museum. So now that those stories will be shared with Major League Baseball, I think that's amazing. I don't see anything bad about it. I think it's just a beautiful thing. And I'm sure the families of those players that are still here are very proud right now.
Go ahead, CD. You got the shirt on.
Yeah. I want to say, it's kind of like it's about time, but, really, if you look throughout the course of history, some of the greatest Black players that have come, they all got their start in the Negro Leagues. And, just like CY said, the acknowledgement from the greatest white players who ever played the game, the acknowledgement that they are some of the best players that they've ever played against, is truly amazing. I think it's just it's a fitting move. I think it's overdue. I think it's long overdue. But I think this is a good step in the right direction. And, I think there are going to be a lot of mad people when they start getting bumped down that career batting average list too.
Oh, there's going to be some uproar, no doubt. Curtis, I want your thoughts.
And think of Ted Williams. We're talking about some white players talking about these are some of the best players they played against. Ted Williams, arguably one of the best hitters of all time. He said it. So when you got guys like him saying that, hey, when I played against those guys, these were the best guys I played against, you also have to put some value to that. And then you just look at what the Negro Leagues did, not just from a baseball standpoint. They had not only black players, they had Latin players, they had white players, they had female players. They brought the first night games. They were traveling internationally. They did all these great things that you see in the game right now, and they were playing in the Major League Stadium. So you can start looking at it and saying, well, they didn't do this, and they didn't play here, and they didn't do that. Well, when they barnstormed and when they played against the white Major Leagues at that time, they were beating these teams year in and year out, game in and game out. So there's so many different great things that the Negro League stood for, represented. And if you haven't got a chance to do it, please go to Kansas City and go to the Negro Leagues Museum and make sure you ask for Bob Kendrick, the executive director there. He is the one that you need to lead your tour.
You embarked on a tour that was all across the country. We started out in the Bronx, went to Queens, and then took off from Newark all the way. Last I knew, they were in St. Louis and headed west. So the tour started off with, we're going to give away equipment. We're going to get kids playing baseball. But in the middle of this pandemic, it changed everything. So tell us about the tour. And I know in New York, I'll end it with this, so I throw the question to you. You gave away 9,000 boxes of food in the Bronx, and that just continued to take off. So talk to us about the tour, and I want you two to jump in as well, and then we'll wrap it up with Michele.
It started with the players taking that seat on Jackie Robinson Day when stuff was happening, and guys deciding, again, we got to do more than just that. So players said, let's put our salaries from those games that we're not going to play, both current and former players. The three of us all donated as well. And we took that money collectively and said, we want to make sure we get it back into the black communities. And we found that doing this with Pull Up Neighbor, going to 33 different cities over the course of 2 months, was probably one of the best ways to do it in this COVID year. We've given out equipment, we've given out food, like you mentioned, and of course, COVID and PPE products such as sanitizer and masks. And as we've continued to go, the number of people that have showed up needing these things, thankful that we're coming to their neighborhoods. And just so you know, we're not just going to the stadium and posting up there something that's easily accessible. We're going to these areas high in need, saying, hey, we've heard that there's a struggle here. We're coming here to give you a little bit of help. And the people have been coming, cars just wrapped around the block. The number of players, both black and white players, that want to come out and show their love and support has been amazing. And we're excited to see this thing continue to keep going.
CD, talk to us about the tour and your impressions on it. And then I want to hear from you, CY, off of him.
Yeah. So when we first came up with this idea about allyship, I think it was one of those things that was inspired by what transcended in the Dodgers clubhouse during that time when people were taking a seat. Is Kershaw kind of standing up for Mookie and being like, "Hey, listen, I don't think this is right. I think we should sit this one out. I'm with Mookie." But that's the kind of connection, as we discussed earlier in the conversation, is like, where are these allies? Because it's not just going to come from us. It's going to have to come from these players that the other side has identified that this is an issue, and it's time for the front office and ownership to start to listen. So to see Schwarber come out today, to see Brent Suter come out today in Cincinnati, as we move on to Louisville, that's the essence of what we're talking about, is being able to unite together in the clubhouse and then support each other in this time of need to give back to these communities that are often overlooked. So it was a beautiful thing. And, with the tremendous response that we've seen with these cars wrapped around the block, I don't think we understood how big it was going to be, but it's almost like, we're trying to look forward to the future locations and just like, hey, make sure it's someplace that can handle the amount of cars that we've seen come through, because it's been pretty crazy. They had an incredible turnout in Cincinnati today. Tomorrow's Louisville, so it's been great to see the pictures and keeping up with it through social media and seeing the smiling faces. But actually, just sitting here for that week and putting together the list of equipment and understanding, how difficult it may be to get your hands on this stuff, the gloves, balls, bats, all this stuff, and to see these kids with this equipment and the smiles on their face, walking away with a glove and a bat, it's really heartwarming. And I think this is everybody who donated and contributed to this should be so very proud right now.